Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Hare Hare.
Jai Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari Yashodanandana Braja Jana Ranjana 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 Jamuna Tira Vanam Chari Yamuna Tira Vanachari Jai Jai Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopijana Vallabha Girivaradhari Gopijana Vallabha Girivaradhari Yashodanandana Braja Jana Ranjana Yashodanandana Braja Jana Ranjana Yashodanandana Braja Jana Ranjana Yamuna Tira Vanachari Yamuna Tira Vanachari Jai Jai Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jai Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jai Jai Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gaura Premanande Hari Hari Om Jai Om Vishnupad Paramahamsa Parvishagacharya Ashtotrashata Shri Srimad Srila Abhay Charananda Bhakti Vedanta Swami Maharaj Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai Ananta Koti Vaishnava Vrinda Ki Jai Namacharya Srila Thakur Haridasa Ki Jai Prem se kaho Sri Kṛṣṇa Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai Shri Shri Radha Krishna Gopa Gopinath Shyam Kunda Radha Kunda Giri Govardhan Ki Jai Vrindavan Dham Ki Jai Navadvip Mayapur Dham Ki Jai Ganga Devi Ki Jai Yamuna Mai Ki Jai Bhakti Devi Ki Jai Tulsi Rani Ki Jai Samaveta Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai Shri Harinama Sankirtana Ki Jai Grantharaj Srimad Bhagavatam Ki Jai ISKCON BBT Samstapakacharya Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai Go Premanande All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to Sri Sri Guru and Gauranga. Jai Srila Prabhupada. इसी को बंद किया जाए यही ये वाला ही जय जय श्री चैतन्य जय नित्यानंद जय अद्वैत चंद्र जय गौर भक्त वृंद जय जय श्री चैतन्य जय नित्यानंद जय अद्वैत चंद्र जय गौर भक्त वृंद जय जय श्री चैतन्य जय नित्यानंद जय अद्वैत चंद्र जय गौर भक्त वृंद This is Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita of Srila Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami, English translation and commentary by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada, founder and Acharya of the International Society for Krishna Consciousness. Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Today we are on Adi Lila, Chapter 1, which is entitled The Spiritual Masters, and we'll begin with text number 58. We'll also discuss briefly text 59, and text 60 is a very, very important verse. So, text 58 is, jīve sākṣāt nāhi tāte guru caittya-rūpe śikṣā-guru haya kṛṣṇa-mahānta-svarūpe. Since one cannot visually experience the presence of the Supersoul, he appears before us as a liberated devotee. Such a spiritual master is none other than Kṛṣṇa himself. Purport. It is not possible for a conditioned soul to directly meet Kṛṣṇa, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. But if one becomes a sincere devotee and seriously engages in devotional service, Lord Kṛṣṇa sends an instructing spiritual master to show him favor and invoke his dormant propensity for serving the Supreme. The preceptor appears before the external senses of the fortunate conditioned soul, and at the same time, the devotee is guided from within by the caittya-guru, Kṛṣṇa, who is seated as the spiritual master within the heart of the living entity. Om jnanatimirandhasya jnananjana shalakaya chakshurun militam yena tasmai Shri Gurave Namah. Mukam karoti vachalam pangum langhayate girim yat kripatamaham vande Shri Gurum dinataranam. Vancha kalpatarubhyascha kripa sindhubhya eva cha patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namaha. Jaya Shri Kṛṣṇa Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shri Vasadi Gaur Bhakta Vrinda. Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Madgavirapi Gopala Swikuryat Kripaya Yadita Daivasam Payah Pitwa Rishayustat Priyajana. We've already heard earlier in this chapter that the spiritual master is non-different from Kṛṣṇa in the limited sense that he is the representative of the Supersoul. If the Supersoul were to step outside of your heart and take the form of a devotee, that is the spiritual master. But he is jīva tattva. He is not the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So we should not misunderstand these statements, such as śikṣā-guru haya kṛṣṇa-mahānta-svarūpe. Means that the Kṛṣṇa takes the form of the Mahanta standing in front of you. Mahanta, or Mohanta, we could say also. He's the end of your illusion. Once the spiritual master is standing before you giving instructions, your illusion is finished. We've all had this experience, I hope. So, sākṣāt haritvena samasta shāstrayuruktas tatha bhavyate eva sadbhihi kintu prabhodhya priya eva tasya. He's only the dear one of Kṛṣṇa. He's not exactly Kṛṣṇa himself. This is the point to be understood. Otherwise, we don't want to slip into the Mayavad tendency. Despite the number of couplets in this chapter which actually state very clearly that the spiritual master is the prakash-swarup of Kṛṣṇa, for example, we've already heard. So not much need to dilate on that other than that note. Krishna Das Kaviraj Goswami then transfers our attention to the 11th canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam, which he's quoting now. Tato dussangamutsrijya satsu sajjeta buddhiman santa evasya chindanti manovyasangamuktibihi. That means one should therefore avoid bad company and associate only with devotees. With their realized instructions, such saints can cut the knot connecting one with the activities unfavorable to devotional service. Purport by His Divine Grace, Srila Prabhupada. This verse, which appears in Srimad Bhagavatam, 11th Canto 26, text number 26, was spoken by Lord Krishna to Uddhava in the text known as the Bhagavad-Gita. The discussion relates to the story of Pururava and the heavenly courtesan Urvashi. When Urvashi left Pururava, he was deeply affected by the separation and had to learn to overcome his grief. It is indicated that to learn the transcendental science, it is imperative that one avoid the company of undesirable persons and always seek the company of saints and sages who are able to impart lessons of transcendental knowledge. The potent words of such realized souls penetrate the heart. Mirabai ne kahai sa ki mere par nakasagaya satguru marya tir. It's maybe the only decent thing she ever said. Sorry for saying so. But this is the idea. The potent words of such realized souls penetrate the heart, thereby eradicating all misgivings accumulated through years of undesirable association. For a neophyte devotee, there are two kinds of persons whose association is undesirable. One, gross materialists who constantly engage in sense gratification. There are people like this. They don't know any hint of devotional service. In this world, such people exist. Maybe not so much here, although every day it seems like there are more of them in India. Khaskar in big cities like Kolkata, Bangalore especially, Delhi, Mumbai, ityadi. But if you go in some places, there are people who are so covered, they don't even know that they're a mirror anymore. A mirror covered by dust. But this mirror has so much dust, you don't even know it's a mirror anymore. There are people like that. You can be like that. Maybe you've already been there. If you've been an animal before. Do you remember? How about when you were Lord Brahma? Do you remember that? No. So we could become pretty bewildered in this world. And such people do exist. They can't even agree that there is such a thing as the soul. They're so dense. One of my godbrothers called it spiritually retarded. So, and atheistic, this is the thing. One of the most powerful nations in the world right now, it has the explicit agenda of wiping out religion worldwide. It's part of Communist Party doctrine. And it's actually going on everywhere. We have to be careful of Marxism. It's very infectious and very dangerous. The word is pernicious because it has some appeal to it. It sounds like it's fair and be nice and share everything, but actually it's very, very extremely destructive. And therefore we see wherever communism goes in the world, it destroys everything. Just count the countries that are the examples historically. Anyway, the point is, one kind of undesirable association is gross materialists who cannot imagine anything other than sense gratification. Therefore, Prabhupada uses the word here. They're constantly engaged in sense gratification. Second kind of undesirable association, unbelievers who do not serve the Supreme Personality of Godhead but serve their senses and their mental whims in terms of their speculative habits. It's a subtle distinction. Usually we hear that the two kinds of non-devotees are what? Those who don't worship Krishna on one hand, and those who are too attached, particularly to the opposite sex. These are the two non-devotees that Chaitanya Mahaprabhu mentions elsewhere in the Chaitanya Charitamrita. But Srila Prabhupada is making a subtle distinction between gross materialists who constantly engage in sense gratification and unbelievers. They're actually worse. You can be a gross materialist and still believe in God. There are some people like that also, although it usually doesn't last very long because you have to go one direction or the other once you've chosen your trajectory. But the unbelievers who do not serve the Supreme Personality of Godhead but serve their senses and their mental whims in terms of speculative habits. This is another dangerous thing. Do not speculate. There is a way to decide what is right and what is wrong. There's a way to decide what to do and what not to do. There is no need to speculate. We have only to sit at the lotus feet of Srila Prabhupada and hear what he has to say. That's why he instructed us to sing every single day. Guru mukha padma bhakya chite te koriya aikya. Arana kori himani asha. That includes Marxism and feminism, for your information. So these are the kinds of, these unbelievers, they're actually more dangerous. So, and the speculative tendency, we all have that. We have to try to root it out consciously. It won't be rooted out unless you consciously make that attempt. Intelligent persons seeking transcendental realization should very scrupulously avoid the company of these two persons. Now, our acharyas have given us some commentaries here on this particular verse. Sanatana Goswami quotes this verse in Hari Bhakti Vilas, chapter 10, text 318. He says, Santo Bhagavad Bhakta Eva Natu Karma Jnanadiparaha. Means, in this verse, the word is used Santa. So that Santa means, Santa, we know Sants, right? Nirguna Sants, this Sant, that Sant. Actually, Santa, he says, means only the devotees of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Natu Karma Jnanadipara. Not those who are dedicated to karma or jnana. He makes it quite clear. And manaso vyasangam grihadi asaktim kamadi sambandham va. What are these saints going to help us to overcome? Vyasangam chindanti. Vyasangam means undesirable association. Prabhupada has mentioned two such categories in his purport. Here, Sanatana Goswami says two more categories. He's attached to his household life. That's one category, attached householder. Those of us wearing white, you can think about this. And the other category, kamadi sambandham va. Or you may not be a householder, but you are attached to your own desires. Kamadi sambandham va. Your independence, if you will, because the renunciates, they tend to be independent. And to get attached to that and to doing what you want to do instead of doing what the Vaishnava wants you to do, that is dangerous also. So he mentions this. And then finally he says, uktibhir. By the things that they say, that means hitopadeshahi, by good instructions. We know there's a book called Hitopadesh. Actually, Srila Prabhupada told, I think, Jagadish Prabhu, that, who was in charge of Gurukula at that time, that you should teach the children Sanskrit through the verses of Hitopadesh. It's a very, very valuable resource for developing character, because that's what it's meant for. Or we can take Hitopadesh just in a generic sense, good instructions. Sridhar Swami says the point of this verse is to show that satsanga is much more effective than going to a tirtha, than worshipping some demigod, or just avoiding association altogether. Jiva Goswami likewise says, asatsanga tyagepi na kinchit syat. Just by detaching yourself from bad association, nothing will happen. Kinchit na syat. Kintu satsangena evetyaha iti tata iti. This verse says, tato dusangam utsrajya. Tata, therefore, means that you have to take the association of the saints. Now, this is the real point. What is the value of the spiritual master? The value is that he is a saintly person. He can give you instruction, he can inspire you, he can eradicate your illusion, he can chastise you if need be. That's the superiority of the devotee Bhagavata over the book Bhagavata even. Okay, next verse, very famous verse you'll all recognize. Satam prasangan mama virya samvido bhavanti hrit karna rasayana katha tadjoshanadashvabhavaragavartvani shradharatir bhaktiranukrameshyati. This is Srimad Bhagavatam. 3rd canto, chapter 25, text 25, Lord Kapila speaking. Translation: the spiritually powerful message of the person of Godhead can be properly discussed only in a society of devotees, and it is greatly pleasing to hear in that association. If one hears from devotees, the way of transcendental experience quickly opens, and gradually one attains firm faith that in due course develops into attraction and devotion. This is a little different translation than we hear in the Bhagavatam. Sometimes Prabhupada gives us a little looking at it from another angle. And similarly, his purport is a little different here in the Chaitanya Charitamrita than the one he's given in the Bhagavatam. In the Bhagavatam, he again emphasizes this point of the necessity, or rather the impossibility of attaining Krishna consciousness without devotee association, good association. So here he says, this verse appears in Srimad Bhagavatam 3.25.25, where Kapila Dev replies to the questions of his mother Devahuti about the process of devotional service. As one advances in devotional activities, the process becomes progressively clearer and more encouraging. It's pretty discouraging in the beginning when you're overwhelmed by all the bad association that you have embraced. Then there's every obstacle, it seems, and how will I ever become Krishna consciousness? But here Prabhupada says, if you just do it, then gradually it becomes very encouraging, because you see, yes, I'm actually overcoming my anarthas. Unless one gets this spiritual encouragement by following the instructions of the spiritual master, it is not possible to make advancement. Therefore, one's development of a taste for executing these instructions is the test of one's devotional service. Initially, one must develop confidence by hearing the science of devotion from a qualified spiritual master. Then, as he associates with devotees and tries to adopt the means instructed by the spiritual master in his own life, his misgivings and other obstacles are vanquished by his execution of devotional service. Don't expect that it's going to happen overnight. You're going to fall. It happens. Everybody. Manusyanam sahasreshu kaśķa-yati siddhaye. How many people even make an attempt? And Krishna says, of those who are trying and have achieved any measure of success, siddha, kaśṇiman veti tattvata. Only one or two, maybe. One guy will understand it. So it's not so easy thing. But it is guaranteed. It's kind of like Ayurveda. Ayurveda takes forever and it's a super hassle. And sometimes you're cheated. Because it's said that Ayurveda only works if the doctor wants it to work. Usually everything comes down to money. But Krishna consciousness is also like that. It is absolutely assured if you find a good spiritual master and you follow his instructions. These things only have to be done. And then you have to be patient. Patient, determined, what is it? Utsahan nishchayat dhairyat. Tat karma pravartanat, sangatyagat, that's what we're discussing. Sato vritti, we're also discussing that. So how do you do this sadhu vritti? What is it? And we'll go on to here. Then, as he associates with devotees and tries to adopt the means instructed by the spiritual master in his own life, his misgivings and other obstacles are vanquished by his execution of devotional service. Strong attachment for the transcendental service of the Lord develops as he continues listening to the messages of Godhead, and if he steadfastly proceeds in this way, he is certainly elevated to spontaneous love for the Supreme Personality of Godhead. In the second chapter of the first canto, we heard that just by hearing about Vasudev Katha, all your karma is eradicated. So Sridhar Swami raises the point there. This is second canto, chapter 2, text number 15 and 16, etc. He says, well, okay, but what happens if I don't really have a taste? So satsangasya bhagavat sangatam upapadayati satamiti. This verse will establish the power of satsanga. And he says, the next verse answers, text 16 of the second chapter of first canto. Shushusho shadatanasya vasudeva katarushi syan mahat sevaya vipra punya tirtha nishevanat. What is that punya tirtha? Nishpapa, somebody who is sinless. Serve that person. What is that seva? Charanashraya, according to Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur. Take shelter of that person. Srimad Bhagavatarthanam asvado rasikai saha. Sajati ashaye snigdhe sadhau sangasvato vare. This is a famous verse from Bhakti-rasamrita Sindhu, that a devotee should taste the meanings of the Srimad Bhagavatam amongst the devotees. What kind of devotees? One should associate with devotees who are more advanced than one in their faith, but who are also like oneself enough that you can relate to them. Sajati ashaya. And they also have to be affectionate to you. That's a prerequisite as well. In other words, you have to get their mercy somehow or other. Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur therein describes, he glosses, Sajati ashaya means samajatiya vasana vishishta. The people who are characterized by having exactly the same kinds of inclinations, spiritual and otherwise. They're in the same category, in other words. And snigdha, to be attached, means gata vishrambhatmaka sneha para, to have really deep affection and friendship. This is the idea. And rasika, what is a rasika? Anybody who calls himself a rasika is not necessarily so. He says, Krishna bhajana vignya, somebody who has actually realized what is Krishna bhajan, somebody who's chanting really seriously, japa, and has gone somewhere with it, that person. So this is the potent association that we're talking about. If we skip ahead to the northern ocean of Bhakti-rasamrita Sindhu, text number chapter 4, the Eastern Ocean, chapter 4, text 15 and 16. We hear faith comes from hearing. There are two stages of sadhu sangha. Do you know this? We talk about sadhu sangha sarva shastra koi, lava matra sadhu sangha sarva siddhi hoy, but that sadhu sangha comes in two stages. The initial stage of sadhu sangha, you happen to hear something, and you think, oh, well, what are they talking about? This is very interesting. You get, your curiosity is aroused, as it were. And so you listen, and you maybe get something from it. What happens from that? Sadhu sangataha shastra shravana dvara shraddha bhavati. Faith will come about. And tad artha vishvasa. You start to believe in what it means. We have this experience. If we have practiced Krishna consciousness to any degree, we must have realized something. And as we hopefully make advance in Krishna consciousness, we begin to see, wait a minute, all these things that I'm hearing in the Srimad, they're actually true. One has to see this. It's not just dogma or some tradition, or it's actually scientific. It's true. And when you actually see that, when you realize that, then that is the second stage of faith. That level of faith, when you actually have some vishvas, trust, confidence, Prabhupada said in this purport here, then you come to bhajana riti shiksha nibandhanaha. According to Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur and Jīva Goswami both, you begin to become attached to hearing instructions about how to worship Krishna. In other words, ado shraddha tata sadhu sango ta bhajana kriya, and from bhajana kriya anarjana vritti syat ityadi. So this nishtha means without distractions, or tatravisheshena satatyam. It is constant, and there is no break. Our problem is that our devotion is very strong, but it's broken. The devotion has to be unbroken. Ahaitaki, apratihata. This means apratihata. This third canto, chapter 25, text 25, and first canto, chapter 2, text 15, 16, adi adi, they're very closely related. They're talking about the same process. So, now let's discuss each of these words. Satam prasangat, according to Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, that means from the powerful association of the saintly persons. What is that powerful association? Prakrishtan sangat, prakrishta sangha. very special devotees. Not just ordinary devotees, but really, really distinguished devotees. Prakrishta Sangha. Otherwise, he says, the topics don't nectarize. They don't become sweet. Bhavanti hrit karna rasayana katha. They don't become that rasayana. So sadhu sangataha eva bhagavati manoratim vahatiti atra kramam aha satamiti. Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur says, this verse is meant to show us that you develop an attraction and an attachment to the personality of Godhead in stages, but it only comes through satsanga. It will not come otherwise. Just like it's said here in text number 59. Santa eva asya chindanti. The only way that you're going to cut this knot of material attachment is through the association of the sadhus. Real sadhus, prakrishta sadhus, prasanga. The sangha that puts you forward, we can say. So, because in that association the kata becomes virya samvida. What does that mean? Viryasya. Samyak vidvedanam. The complete realization you get. That's according to Sridhar Swami. Sanatan Goswami, samyak vedanam man mahatmyasya samyak vedanam, according to Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur. You realize it. You can see that, not that you realize it, but hearing you can see that he's realized it. He knows what he's talking about. And then you get some faith of your own. This is the second stage of sadhu sangha. That actually something is awakened, that wait a minute, if he's got this from hearing Bhagavatam, then I can get the same thing from hearing Bhagavatam. And gradually your mind fills up with this samyak vidvedanam that you've been given by the mercy of the pure devotee. And then what happens? Bhavanti hrit karna rasayanak. That katha becomes like medicinal katha. But medicine, everybody knows, you can't sell Ayurvedic medicine unless it's sweet. So they always put sugar in it. One doctor told me it's all just candy. Most of it, unless he makes his own meds. Then viryasya, Sukhada, Sridhar Swami and Sanatan Goswami says this hrit karna rasayana means it makes you happy. Sukhada. When you hear this katha, yes, I recognize this, I like this. And you become happy. Just by hearing about Krishna, you become so pleased. And medicinal in the sense, according to Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, because it is anartanavritika katha. It is katha that affects the process of anartanavritti. It cleans out your heart at the same time that it pleases your ears and your mind. It also cleans out your heart. Therefore, rasayana. Rasayana means a kind of medicine. So, tat joshanat ashu apavargavartmati. Joshanat. Usually this root, verbal root, jush dhatu. Usually it means satisfaction, approval, pleasure, agreeability, liking, etc. Your choice, thing you would choose. But according to Sridhar Swami and Sanatan Goswami, in this context, it means sevanat, by serving. Tad joshanat, by that service. And Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur says it means pritya asvadanat, relishing that service with love. What is that? Priti purvakam, Krishna says in Bhagavad-Gita. Srila Prabhupada, in his translation of the 3rd canto, 25th chapter, 25th verse, he translates it as cultivation. It is a cultivation, which kind of implies what we've already heard from Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, that you have to go step by step. It comes in stages. But ashu apavargavartmini. Now this is a problem, this word ashu. What does ashu mean? Yeah, shigra. Very quickly it happens. But Srila Prabhupada, in his translation, says it happens gradually. But he also says it happens very quickly. How do we reconcile this? This is called mimamsa. When you have two equally authoritative statements that don't seem to congeal, there's a conflict, you have to process it somehow. What do? You try to find a way that you can reconcile it according to the standard system of pramanas, which we've already mentioned. Guru Sadhu Shastra Vakya chite te korya aikya, ityadi. So, Jiva Goswami, commenting on Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, tells us, sometimes we hear this word, sadhya punanti, right? Immediately you're purified. He says it doesn't always happen immediately. Just yesterday I was initiated, but I still have an artist. So what's happening? People sometimes think like this. Jiva Goswami says if you pile up 100 pond leaves and take one of those long needles that the ladies use for making garlands and push it through the pond leaves, it goes through those leaves immediately, correct? No, it doesn't. It goes through the 100th leaf, then it goes to the 99th leaf, then it goes to the 98th leaf, 97, 96, 90, adi, until you get, then it's done. So simultaneously, it is gradual and it's quick, because our conception of time is skewed. It is conditioned by our very limited focus of attention. Being conditioned souls, localized in this material world, we're thinking that, 10 years I've been doing this is a long time, and what am I getting for it? It's not a long time. In the eternal scope of things, it's just a flash. And so similarly, this is how we resolve this apparent contradiction. Tad joshanat ashwabhavargavartmani. If you can become Krishna conscious to any extent in one lifetime, that's very fast, considering how long have you been here. There are 8 million some odd options that you've maybe already taken. That's a lot of time wasted. So one life is only usually less than 100 years. It's nothing. So abhavarga vartmani. From that service, you are very quickly placed on abhavarga vartma. And Sridhar Swami says this means avidya nivritti. Means basically the same thing as anartha nivritti, because our anarthas all come from avidya, ignorance. So very quickly you're placed on the path that will destroy all of your illusions. And Sanatana Goswami adds mokshova, or on the path of liberation, in other words. And then what happens once you're on the liberated platform? All of us, as long as we are engaged in Krishna consciousness under good direction, we're on the liberated platform. Srila Prabhupada said that. We may realize what we're doing or not. It may or may not be mature, that's another matter. But as long as we stick to this process, we are in the liberated state. And what happens in that state of liberation? Shraddharatir bhaktir anukramishyati. Adau Shraddha we've already discussed. It begins with some Shraddha. And that just as there are 2 stages of sadhu sangha, there are 2 stages of Shraddha. The first one is some curiosity based on some kind of maybe even agyata sukriti. You don't know what's going on, but let me hear this. You have to be pious just to make that decision. But then, if you hear and you understand and you apply what you've heard and then you realize it as a result, that gives you very strong faith. So 2 stages of faith are also there. Jiva Goswami calls one of them Vishvasa, and Vishwanath Chakravarti calls it Asakti, which is interesting. Because in the verse we usually hear Asakti as a different stage. There's some overlapping of terms here. As a matter of fact, in his commentary on 1st Canto, Chapter 2, Text 21, again, another connection with this verse, or this topic rather, he lists 14 stages that we have to go through. We know beginning Shraddha, Sadhu Sangha, Bhajana Kriya, Anartha Nivritti. So he says, first of all, Satam Kripa. From that association you get some blessing. That is necessary. Then Mahat Seva. You do some service. Then the second stage of Shraddha kicks in. Then Guru Padashraya. You take shelter of the spiritual master. Bhajaneshu Spriha. You develop a desire to really let me assimilate what is this bhakti. Let me internalize this. Or as Prahlad Maharaj says in the 5th canto, Aveshyatam no matirapya haitaki. May our minds also get into this deeply, continually. And then you get bhakti, which is characterized by anarthabhagamas, the destruction of your anarthas. Tata nishtha, then you're firm. Richis tathasakti rati prematha darshanam. Harer madhurya anubhava ityarthaha syush chaturdashe. So, little bit different order and a few extra stages, but the point is that you will come to, somehow or other you come to rati, which is in third canto, according to Sanatana Goswami and Vishwanath Chakravarti, that means bhava bhakti, the rati in that verse. And we know that it's one of the bhavas in the Chaitanya Charitamrita, Madhya Lila, chapter 23, text 16 and 17. Kshantiravhyartha kalatvam viraktirmana shunyata ityadi. You all know this verse, or shall I recite it? Should I say it? Okay. Asha bantha. First of all, kshantir, to be very tolerant or forgiving. Avyartha kalatvam, to be very concerned about not wasting time. Virakti, to be detached. Manashunyata, to be free from pride. Asha banta, to be bound up with a hopeless hope that somehow you can become Krishna conscious. Samudkantha, and to be very eager. Namagane sadaruchi, to always have a taste, not just in the morning, to always have a taste for the holy name. And singing the holy name, like we have 24-hour kirtan. Asaktis, to be attached, but attached to what? Gunakhyane, to the narrations of the Lord's pastimes and his qualities, really. Just like we sing every morning. Why are the cowherd ladies also attached to Krishna? What do we sing at Mangalarti? Gopangana gana chitta vinodana kyon samasta guna gana dhama. He's a repository of all auspicious qualities. So asaktis tad gunakhyane and pritis tad vasatistale. Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur demonstrates what that means for us. Those of us who are here in Vrindavan or even visiting Vrindavan, you have to have some attachment to come here. So what does it mean? He says, Yatradhipatyam vrishabhanuputriya yenodayet prema sukham jananam yasmin mamasha balavat yatosmin mamastu Vrindavana eva vasaha. May my only residence be Vrindavan, that place where Srimati Radharani is the supreme queen and where the people naturally are imbued with divine love for her and Govinda. That is my strong desire, my asha banta, if you will, is that I can only live in Vrindavan, always surrounded by cows, gopas, gopis, and the sound of Krishna's flute. And Govardhan, and Yamuna, and Giriraj, and Tulsi Rani, and all the tamal trees. They're all called pavrikshas. The dust, every little grain, speck of dust will fulfill your desires. Chintamani prakara. This temple is made out of chintamani. And so are our houses here in Vrindavan. Chintamani prakara sadma. Sadma means house. And the cows, they're all kamadhenus. Anything you want to whisper in that cow's ear, she will give to you, if you please her. This is the fortune. Sanatana Goswami says that all of this is affected by the association of great souls. Etad hi vivaranam cha Sri Mahanubhavayar eva rasarnave kritamiti eva. We're placed in the ocean of bhakti rasamrta only by the mercy of great souls. And Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur likewise says, Samprati maya pravartyamana bhaktirevam anukramena loke pracharayashyati. That Kapila Dev is hinting in this verse, Shraddharatir bhaktir anukramishyati, that gradually I will unfold all these things in this world. I will come and preach. It sounds a lot like he's talking about Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, doesn't it? Because he's the only reason any of us are here. If it were not for this Kali Yuga Pavana, where would Srila Prabhupada be? Where would any of our acharyas be? This Mahaprabhu, Krishna has decided to show some mercy. Therefore he's called Karuna Avatara. So, what is our process here. Sangha, we have some, even casual association, Jiva Goswami says back in the first canto, second chapter. Just by coming into the association of devotee for any purpose, somehow or other there will be some opportunity to either hear something or render service. It's natural. He drops his bag. Oh yeah, I'll pick it up for you. That is how your spiritual life can begin like that. And once that happens, then some faith will be there. Then you hear something, then you're curious. This is the second thing. Curiosity. Then Shraddha develops. Prakrishta Sangha, you take really special association. Then all these topics become nectar. Anartha Nivritti goes on. You become fixed, nishtha. And these topics become, because they're virya samvit. And then you get a taste. Joshanat, from that taste or from that seva, asakti, and then bhavarati. And others are defining this bhakti here. Sanatana Goswami said it is prema lakshana bhakti. Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur says the same thing. But anukramishiti. Shraddharatir bhaktir anukramishiti means step by step. Kramena bhavishyati. Sridhar Swami and Sanatana Goswami both say the same thing. And Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur adds to that, anukramena bhavishyati. Same thing. It's stage after stage. Because it's not that you can choose any step you want in any order. It has to come in this order. Whether you take the list of 14 that Vishwanath Chakravarti has given us back in the first canto, or you take the list of 12 that we hear from Rupa Goswami and Bhakti-rasamrita Sindhu, then it has to happen in this order. So, very beautiful, very famous verse here, and therefore, in this context of explaining the spiritual masters, Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami has quoted this verse. The spiritually powerful message of Godhead can be properly discussed only in a society of devotees, and it is greatly pleasing to hear in that association. If one hears from devotees, the way of transcendental experience quickly opens. This is a point that Prabhupada emphasizes in his Bhagavatam commentary on this verse. It's practical. When you hear from devotees, you're going to get practical guidance. When you hear from the scholars or from the Mayavadis or from the Karmis, it's theoretical at best. Maybe it's infotainment, or maybe it's at best, poetry or speculative nonsensical speculations that we've already heard about. But when you hear from devotees, and particularly what is the characteristic of Srila Prabhupada's books, he doesn't say anything unless it's vitally relevant to what you're going to do about this. His instructions are of this nature. So practical. And it's understood that you should follow those instructions and get the result. And if you do get the result. Gopal Krishna Maharaj says this all the time. I've heard him. Those who are coming to Mangalarati, those who are chanting 16 rounds, they're taking only Krishna Prasadam, they're hearing every day, they're worshipping the deity, associating with devotees, performing Sankirtan Ityadi, these 5 processes that we hear from Nectar of Devotion, they get the result. And other people who don't do these things, they don't get the result. And to the extent that you do these things, you get that much result. So, satatyam, as we heard already from Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, it has to be constant, and it has to be, also we mentioned briefly that ahaitaki, koi hetu nahi. Hetu ka matlab hai, that you've got a motive. It's not that you're putting something in the hundi and you're putting something south. No. Everything should be for Krishna. If we can embrace that principle somehow or other, mainly through good association, then very quickly we advance. Ashu apavarga vartmani. And then we realize, what is it Shraddha really? And what is this rati actually? And what is prema bhakti? We will all get there. It is guaranteed. I'm going to stop here. We have a few minutes. If anybody has any questions or any comments on any of these points. We've covered a lot of topics in today's class. I mean, this one verse only, third canto, chapter 25, text 25, it would not be difficult to give a month discussing all the all the various aspects of that verse and the different things that so many devotees have said about it in different contexts. And very, very rich vein here we have by the mercy of Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami. Any questions or any comments? Devada Pandit Prabhu.
So basically this verse mentions that we have to take shelter of a bona fide guru and surrender unto him. So, but it is seen that we don't get often association, close association. We have to surrender to the authorities, and oftentimes devotees, they are confused. So how to understand exactly?
I'll tell you how I understand it, because I had the same question. We're talking about the spiritual master, and particularly the spiritual master, how he's non-different from Krishna. Suddenly, that is in text 58, suddenly text from 59 on, he's talking about sadhu sangha. So what's the connection there? We've already heard, śikṣā-guru haya kṛṣṇa-mahānta-svarūpe. He comes as a śikṣā-guru. And your diksha-guru is there. He'll also generally be the same person who will give you initiation, will also give you instruction. But you can take any number of śikṣā-gurus and take instruction from them if they're bona fide. And that means that they will be repeating the same thing that your diksha-guru says. Otherwise, you don't need to hear from them. Because after all, he's taking you back to Godhead, not this other way. So that's how I see it. And therefore, he's telling us the satsanga prabhava, as Sridhar Swami said. He's pointing out what is the tremendous importance of satsanga. Satsanga. When a little tree, sometimes we see the gardeners, they put these little wire fence around a little tree. Why? Because if they don't do that, then the goats are going to come and eat all the leaves and kill the tree. Zurur, there's nothing that a goat won't eat. I saw this happen once when I was living elsewhere in Vraja. The neighbors came from Delhi, they don't know that every day the goat wala comes through with hundreds of goats. So they had a nice flower bed full of genda, and this attracted the attention of all the goats, and within half an hour they'd quaffed the entire thing, finished. Person came home that evening and had a surprise. So a goat will eat a small sapling if it is not protected. So how do you protect that sapling? Also we call bhakti lata. How do you protect it? With satsanga. That fence is like satsanga. And then what happens? By accepting that shelter, we gradually grow and become strong. Let's say you have a banyan tree. In the beginning, a banyan tree is just a little sapling like that. Any goat can come and finish it off. But in the end, a banyan tree is so mighty that its trunk alone can maybe fill this courtyard. You can tie any number of war elephants to that banyan tree, and they're not going anywhere. This example is given by Priyadas in his Bhakti-rasa Bodhini. That's a commentary on Bhakti-yoga, 17th century commentary on the Braj Bhakti-yoga. So this is the point here. By taking shelter of the sadhus also, there should be no difference. Guru, sadhu, shastra, vakya. They're the same thing. Chitete korya aikya. They're one. That's my understanding. And then he keeps going on. He keeps even after this, for quite some time. He's glorifying the sadhus. So take whatever association you can get. Who has understood Krishna more than you, whose mood is similar to yours, and who is affectionate towards you, that person you can get mercy from in advance through his guidance. Is it okay? Yeah. All right. So no other questions, and we'll stop here. Thank you very much. All glories to Srila Prabhupada.
Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna.